but I began to realize that it was speaking to me through children, and so it was kind of a revelation in a way to see how it's kind of like the therapist who's dealing with the problem child, but they're actually dealing with the parents.
Yeah.
And so there it was. So it's been hard for me to get past Keva, but this is really helping. So anyway, I love your book, and I think I almost have it memorized.
Wow. Oh my God, John, I think you're one in a million.
Well, I don't know. It was unexpected how it's that speaking thing to me. So I just thought I'd share that with everybody. If you're kind of like me and you're very Keva, and how do you get over that, or how do you get beyond that? So it's been a good tool. So thank you, Rabbi.
Wow, you made my month. That's really powerful. That's the whole, that's the aspiration right there. That anything that any tool finds a receptive tool craver,
Yeah.
Beautiful. What about other folks? What did you kind of discover this week in this dialectic between Keva and Kavanah? And maybe you identified a prayer moment that you explored. Those of you who weren't here last week, we talked about kind of identifying a moment of your day that you do religiously, quote unquote, and putting some either language to it or ideally some language of intentionality around it. And I say the language piece because we never pray. There is the instruction, even when we're praying, quote unquote, silently, we should always be able to hear ourselves praying. And I think about that a lot. So, John, you might read the book out loud or whisper it out loud or something, because what happens when our breath is engaged is very different than just the mental cognition. I swim a lot, and I think a lot about breath, and I would just, it's a cool thing to explore what can happen when your breath is actually, when your voice, not just your breath, but all of those things connected are in service or in use. Our mind can be less places when something is audible, even to ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah. So I interrupted myself before I gave you all a chance to kind of share what came up this week.
Somebody.
Well, I realized I didn't give myself enough credit for the keva that I do. I virtually never, I might miss once or twice a month, but I have 5 days a week that I'm going to different classes and doing things, and that itself was keva. I didn't realize, I don't do as many blessings probably, and that was kind of what I was thinking of. So I've been working on doing more blessings, but for me, it was a lot of noticing, because I see myself as just a total Kavanah person, that I actually have been balancing out more since I've been exploring Judaism.
That's awesome, Jade. Yeah, and having those fixed time for learning is very powerful. Fixed times for doing anything. And we talked about that a little bit. It's within the boundaries that creation is possible. That's so cool. Anybody have a prayer moment that you're open to sharing if it's, PG or at least R or whatever. Or you can make one up now. Folding the laundry. Dana, it's very deep.
I would share. I wasn't here during the last class, and so I missed a lot of this, but I'm already appreciating just the conversation around it. A lot of the work that I do, I work with a lot of folks who have severe and persistent mental illness, and the work that I do really focuses a lot around routine and stability. And these moments of intentionality and mindfulness and living it with intention is so powerful and so central to our humanness, just a universal humanness. And I know for me, it's something that I do. I show up to work 15 or 20 minutes early, and I sit quietly in my office without doing anything, and have a moment of intention for my day before I get started doing things. And that's part of what I do. And I could see very much building in prayer and into that moment of mindfulness and moment of intention.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah. And we talked, David, it's cool that you're already hungry for this, because we talked about the word prayer. And by the way, if you want the recording, let me know ASAP, because apparently they can't store so many of our classes. So maybe I'll just send it to all of you, and you can do whatever you want with it. Sell it on eBay or something. The word for prayer, lehitpalel, is reflexive, and it's not that prayer does something like out there in particular. It's a self-reflexive, meaning like it does it within us. And that then has ramifications and ripples. But I think it's a very unique insight, really, from the grammar of the word itself, that's pretty unique to Judaism. And most Jews don't realize it. People in general think they're praying for something to happen outside of themselves. And at least grammatically, we are invited to, stir the pot within.
Well, I wonder if that goes along with nefesh is a little bit of God's breath and spark that made us alive. So it kind of makes sense to me that God is already inside us from that spark. So going inside to connect with that spark makes sense.
Nice. Beautiful. Yeah. And we are aspects of the divine. So there is no really internal or external at some level. There is just an experience of oneness. Any other? Evan, what's going on for you? I want to hear you.
I don't know if you really want to hear from me.
I
It'll
want
make
to
the conversation go in like bizarre directions.
Bring it on.
You really want to? Okay. I'm very interested in trying to unbind the heart, and the way that I experience what we're going to call prayer is, my main practice is about letting go of everything. So it's kind of like letting go of the observer, letting go of the breath, letting go of really your body even, and seeing what's down there deep in the depths, and not trying to control or not trying to do anything but let that just be there. So, that prayer for me is that, this week the way that that's being actualized in the world is I'm thinking a lot about, what I'm taking back from that is I'm considering this issue of truth and how it intersects with this practice versus my kind of foothold I've had in a long life with Buddhist practice. And so I've been very interested in kind of philosophical discourse around what we could broadly call philosophical problems that are not solvent right now in philosophy, and how we can talk about truth as context and infinities and circular reasoning and dogma. And I could get into a long chain of thoughts that are connected to what's down there in the depths and where that's taking me. So if you'd like, I could speak for the entire class if you want, but just that's kind of what's going on for me. And really I see a dialectic here between this practice I have very long time in Buddhism and now Judaism, and trying to see what's there. It's very interesting. It's very interesting because when you study a single subject, you see it from a certain perspective, and there's certain problems that maybe don't become as obvious when you see it from another perspective. So actually having some dialectic there enables one to see something that's very interesting. So that's very alive for me. So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah. On that last note, I had a strong moment of identity building when I was living in rural Zimbabwe, and I was asked to say the Shema. I was asked to pray, and out of my lips came the Shema. So I totally get that context and that juxtaposition as being very powerful. It's an amazing tool that you have to have depth, someplace else to kind of, push off of. There's, if for those of you, all of you really, Rabbi Alan Liu, Alava Shalom, blessed memory, my meditation teacher, and he trained as a Zen priest and then became a conservative rabbi. And he was one of the founders of the San Francisco Zen Center. So definitely check out his books and teachings. And in terms of where you started, Evan, like, what are we doing when we're praying? You talked about letting go and the Shema that I hope we get to at some point, but the six word anthem, the Nike swoosh of Judaism, is about listening. So I think, whatever you call it, there is a conduicy that we're, alignment, or again, we could play with language all night, but letting go, receiving, listening, and there are just like there are so many names for God, there are so many types of prayer. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else want to pop in before we dive into Pesach? Just like a little road trip down Pesach Lane. Wild. Okay. So we're already at class 7, which seems crazy. We have 2 more in this road show. Not next week. Just a flag for that. It's Thanksgiving. Very Jewish holiday. Thankfulness. Okay, so
is the one after Thanksgiving going to be during Hanukkah then? So are we going to have class during Hanukkah?
That is a great question.
Yeah, that's
Sunny.
gonna be the fourth night of Hanukkah.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we'll light candles together, everybody. Bring your Hanukkah, some candles. Okay. So, yeah, Hanukkah. Wow. Thanksgiving. So, maybe just before we even dive into these slides, like what are your questions? Did you we spoke of last time the trope of remember you were slaves in Egypt as being one of the strongest phrases in all of Torah, the most repeated. Jade, yeah.
I one of the classes I'm taking is a introduction to the Bible with an Orthodox rabbi. And he said that the actual translation of the word, that there is no real word for slave in the Torah, that the word is a worker.
Mm-hmm.
And that was even more powerful to me, because it's true that we live in a very capitalist tied culture, and our work identity is what becomes who we are. And I live this a lot since I had to be medically retired, that, it shifts. I do a lot of odd jobs now, and like how people treat you when you say, oh, hi, who are you? What do you do? And for a little while I worked for lice doctors, and oh my God, that made people really freak out. And then I raised money for charities at golf tournaments. And that was like, people completely had a different energy with me. And I realized that those expectations about being a worker are what is on top of us, that interrupts us from achieving whatever it is that's kadosh, that is our life path for being holy. And I actually really prefer to know. I wanted to share that the real word is worker. So we really are all trapped that way. It is, we for a long time as a community interpreted that as slavery for whatever reason. But do you agree with what Rabbi Buchwald said, that the word actually translates to worker, not to slave?
So, Hebrew is very potent. So avodah is both work and service. Working for, for a paycheck, and also working for God. And so avadim are slaves and workers. And there's a slide about one of the sections of the Haggadah referring to avadim. Yeah. So let's go in, because I think there'll be a lot of moments of whatabouts. I think we mentioned this too in our Bible class, that the Exodus narrative is probably the most famous of all biblical narratives. And Jews, if they don't do anything, it's most likely that they still do Pesach. And Pesach means, it's just the Hebrew of Passover. And it's literally referring to the passing over of the angel of death. So it's cool that actually the English means what the Hebrew means. It also means Pesach is to have an open mouth. It's to pay is your mouth, and sach is an open mouth, which has a lot of mystical implications. But just a note about this breakdown here. So Passover, one of my teachers, Rabbi Arthur Breen, would talk about the way in which there are life cycle holidays, historic holidays, agricultural holidays, and national holidays. And Passover kind of checks all the boxes. It's a national holiday about our coming out. It's an agricultural holiday about the onset of spring. I can't remember what I even said, but it checks them all off. Okay. But people, oh, here's where I was going. But people dig it, people do it because it does check them all off, right? It's both, it hits all the spots for people. There's something compelling on a deep and timeless level about this narrative that Jews, regardless of their practice or how they consider themselves, return to this narrative and immerse themselves in a traditional text and a traditional meal. Another big element to it is that it's in the home. It's like Shabbat. It's around the table. Surprise, surprise. Okay. So let's go to this next. There are such huge questions related to Passover. I mean, we could have an entire year about Passover. A question that I like to think about is, where exactly does the Exodus begin? And that's what this slide is showing. Before Moses delivered Israel, Shifra and Puah, the maidservants, delivered Moses. So kind of speaking to this idea of when does Exodus start? Here, this is saying, it started with the midwives. The Egyptian midwives caused and kind of catalyzed redemption, not just Moses. And some could say it started even before that. But there are two made verses where a new king, the Hayamelech Hadash, there was a new king who arose who did not remember Joseph. And this is a very profound verse in that Joseph is really kind of the last trace of the Exodus narrative. Remember, the book of Exodus, the second book, begins really as both a bridge to Genesis and a highway or a road off of Exodus. We move from the familial Joseph, children of Israel, to the national story of the Jewish people. And another key moment is the actual enslavement. The text says in different places, and if you do the math, many people have, that we were enslaved for 420 years, which is pretty forever. You think about the generations that were lost. And so, then the idea that this recounting has gone on for, centuries after, to recall that experience as if it were our own, as if we were there. So this, any questions or thoughts, just kind of where we're going so far? There's so much to say. So you really, for this one, please interrupt.
I have a question about baby Moses's midwives.
Mm-hmm.
I know the story from celebrating Pesach and from watching The Prince of Egypt a lot as a kid.
Yep.
A lot. We were weirdly obsessed.
Yep.
And the baby Moses in particular feels very important to me. And I don't know that part about the midwives saving him. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's cool. And Lizzie, I would contemplate, why is the baby so important to you, which is such a beautiful connection. So the decree was when that new king arose who knew not Joseph, a decree was put into place where all the boy babies were to be killed. And Moses's older sister, Miriam, basically went to her parents, and this is the Midrash, but she went to her parents and said, by you not having more children, you're basically adding more to Pharaoh's decree to kill the boy babies. You're saying don't have any babies because people just stop having sex. Mm-hmm. And there's gorgeous midrashim about the women seducing their husbands in the fields with fish and water and all of this, like in this kind of rejection of stopping, the growth, the possibility of new babies. But when Moses was born, Shiphrah and Puah were the maidservants and that would help the Hebrew women deliver. Mm. And so it says that they, fearing their God, refused to follow Pharaoh's decree and allowed baby boy to live. And then there was the whole hiding of Moses for 3 months. And then his mother, Yocheved, whose name we rarely hear, but Yocheved puts him in this basket to further kind of avert the decree to not kill him, but to let him go and let fate occur. And sure enough, Miriam, the sister, is standing at the bank. And so is Pharaoh's daughter, who eventually pulls him in. And so Moshe becomes the word for to pull from the waters.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't realize there was so much about Moses before the river scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's
where can I read the story? Where is this?
It's in Torah.
Okay.
I mean, no one's hiding it. Yeah, if you go to just start at the beginning of Exodus and then the Midrashim about that, they're in a lot of different places, but there's an amazing book called, let me just Google it real quick. Legends. Yalek. Yeah, the Book of Legends. Sefer HaAgadah. So I'll put it in the chat. It's an awesome book of the kind of collection of legends, organized. The best part of the book is the index. It's insane. And I'll put it there. It's pretty spendy. We have some in the library if you want to borrow it to check out. But yeah, so much happens. And even his name, I mean, he doesn't get the name Moses until later. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So where did the Exodus begin is the major question. And then, the idea of Moses grows up at warp speed in the book of Exodus. It all happens so fast. And soon he's, living inside of the palace and has this kind of liminal bubble bursting experience when he looks out and sees his kinsmen. And there's a progression of his kind of awakening, you might say. First, he sees Egyptians harming each other, and then he sees an Egyptian harming a Hebrew, and that triggers something in him, his consciousness about who he is, having been raised in the palace. Kind of jumps the fence, literally and figuratively, and becomes a murderer. and runs, and God eventually, tracks him down at the burning bush. There are a lot of videos for this PowerPoint. I'm just going to put them in the chat like I do. They're also on that 1-page sheet that's in the drive. Have you all been doing okay accessing the drive? Do you need anything, or you're making your way okay? Just put them here in case you want to click along. So this is one of the clips from the book, from the film Prince of Egypt, and there's a reason, Lizzie, why you got so hooked on that. It's brilliantly done, and a lot of rabbis were involved in Disney's production of the narrative, in bringing in different midrashim. I know I'm using a lot of language tonight. Let me just, so midrash is a kind of a rabbinic story that fills in a blank. So there are a lot of midrashim that Disney brought in to kind of fill out the narrative, and it's, incredibly, incredibly powerful. So this is a clip from the Prince of Egypt. Did anybody want to comment on that clip or say anything about those videos that you might have seen?
Which one is it? The first one, what are they showing us?
That was the
Burning bush.
Yeah, the burning.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have something kind of silly to say. Kind of silly. I mean, I
Right.
know this is like a serious topic, but to some degree, but okay, I'm also like a little bit of a joker. Maybe hasn't come across yet in these classes, but I am a bit. And when I watch those videos and you're talking right now, I cannot stop thinking about Bob Marley. I know it kind of sounds like silly or something, but like a younger version of me, much younger, sitting incredibly stoned, thinking about Exodus and thinking about this thing. I mean, he's singing about it. The album Legend, one of the most widely distributed albums in the world, is essentially about this story. And so I don't have anything like super profound to say, other than there's a silly memory there that's highly mapped onto all of this. And just wanted to say something about it because it came up in those videos and comes up now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Bob took it and ran. I mean, everybody has. That's the thing. It is so iconic. And I mean, in my studies, of Rastafarianism, the origin between, reggae and Bible is very strong. And even the history, Haile Selassie and Queen Sheba were connected. And, this takes place in Egypt. This is an African tale. So it's totally there for me too. I think about it all the time during the Seder. I'm like, I actually wonder if Bob ever, I'm sure he came to Seders, and I know Ziggy has. Ziggy's in LA and is pretty active, connected with the Jewish community. But yeah, these are our freedom songs. And then by the rivers of Babylon, that speaks to, that first kind of dispersal. But that's straight from Psalms, the Song of Ascents, Psalm 121. So it's these texts, I mean, they are so alive. I listen to a lot of Christian rock, actually, because I love the way that they set our liturgy. to music, and it's, you hear what they do, and Jewish music, of course, don't get worried, anybody, but these are such ridiculously beautiful texts, and they're timeless, especially the book of Psalms. I mean, I don't think we'll get a chance to go too much into depth, but it's like the most human heartbeat, this collection of Psalms that we have, 150 of them. Ridiculous. If you ever just want to pray from your guts, pick that baby up. So good. So yeah, I'm with you, Evan. It's Bob got it. I mean, and there's, I don't know if you've ever listened to Matisyahu too, but there's a lot of ways that he kind of brought again the text alive in a very pop way. And our kids here at the religious school were singing One Day the other day, and I went in and I was like, do you all know what One Day Matisyahu is talking about? And they were like, no. So I picked it up, and it's from the prayer, the Aleinu, and it's this call that one day there be peace. And they're like ancient hyperlinks that these artists are drawing on, and they're totally charged even before they got there. So it doesn't surprise me that they become like gigantic hits. And it's Bob, so I was gonna get my daughter has a little wooden Seder plate, and I was gonna get it out, but she went to sleep already, so scratch that. But did I skip a slide? Wait, here we go. Oh, it doesn't have the Seder plate here. So it's a detailed narrative around the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, and in some ways the hardening of God's heart. John, in case you're wondering, my first big adult book is about the book of Exodus. So we'll see, God willing, it'll come out someday. But it's, as we spoke about, I think it was last time, there's this evolution between the becoming of the Jewish people and the becoming of God, and these plagues. Does anybody kind of want to summarize, why these plagues happen, or what were these plagues about, just in your own words? What was going on here?
I think the text actually says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart so he wouldn't listen, which kind of confuses me, that maybe God didn't have to do all these plagues because Pharaoh's kind of wanted to listen but was made not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of like, feels like that shell game, to me, where you hide the thing under the shells. It's not clear, was Pharaoh hardening Pharaoh's heart, or was God hardening Pharaoh's heart? And there's actually a turn in the text. But why the plagues? What, maybe, put aside this question of who's hardening whose heart. Why these plagues?
To convince Pharaoh to let the Jews go. To make it very uncomfortable and costly to keep the Jews as slaves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one reason for sure. Absolutely. What was God trying to prove? God could do anything, like just take the darn people out.
I always think about that with like, why that? If the external might is so powerful, why not find a different way to free the people without besieging the Egyptian people? The culling of the babies, the whole Passover thing just kills me. I'm like, why?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very intense progression, right? Between the water turns to blood, right? The Nile was their god, all the way to this Makat Bechorim, the slaying of the firstborn, of whom Pharaoh was a firstborn. Yeah.
I always saw this kind of like this idea as kind of like a way I've thought about it, as I've thought about it as like I'm going to put the right words to it. Like God doesn't exist, maybe. Like, okay, so what I mean by that is, let me unpack that. What I mean is there's some question. Like you could certainly attribute all this to some other causes, right? And so there's always this kind of hidden nature to the thing. And so it's always this kind of split where it's not clear, like, of course, causes and conditions could create this. Yes, it's an explanation. There's also a different explanation. And so there's kind of this issue of volition in play here about like the Pharaoh choosing to do this from his own volition and not be completely clear that it was God acting on him. There's some question there. If it was too explicit, right, then it would be, there'd be something different, a different twist to it. At least that's how I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like if God hadn't been in the picture, how would the story have kind of unfolded? And why do we need God in the picture? Like, what is this? Who is that demonstrating what to?
Well, I guess God had to show being very, very powerful to convince people that they should cross the sea when it split and to follow the column and to wander for 40 years. They had a lot to face and they needed a big faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could have been this kind of self-cultivation exercise. Yeah. We could stay with this a long time, but I just wanted to give you a little, remember that the whole purpose of the Passover Seder is to get people to ask questions. So it's odd. There are a lot of odd moments in the Seder itself. And, the discussion of the plagues is, of course, replete with possibilities, including, what are the contemporary plagues? Is COVID now on this list? Is HIV AIDS now on this list? Is cancer on this list? Dirty water on this list?
Homelessness.
Yeah.
Forest fires, floods, lands.
Yeah. And what's our role in all of that? What was the role of the people then in the plagues, and what's our role now? And same with God. What's God's role? So they've divided this up into 6 parts, and this is part 4. And I'm just highlighting a few different verses. This verse from Exodus 12. So just a quick note. So this is the chapter and then the verse. So it's chapter 12, Exodus 33. So going back, Lizzie, to your question, you could you could start with the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 1. It happens, you'll see, like here we are, Exodus 1, Exodus 2, Exodus 12. I mean, it's really a quick narrative. So this is the image here of the making of the matzah, our haste. So it becomes the bread of both affliction and freedom. It kind of flips on the dime. And this notion of mixed multitudes, some say that this is the kind of beginning of those that had converted or were in the process of converting also came out. And so this is another moment when folks who choose Judaism kind of look back to say, we too were part of the Exodus. And I mean, I love this moment because it speaks to, you know, we had neighbors, we had strong neighbors who came with us, regardless of, you know, how they identified. And this video, does anybody remember which exactly this one was? Trying to can pop over to the, I think this is the second link in those links of, I should have labeled them maybe. What was this one? I'm just gonna, I don't think this was the orange. I think that's the next one. Anyway, whatever it is. Oh yeah. Oops.
The Red Sea one, I think.
Oh, the Red Sea. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, this is the moment of that kind of combination between prayer and agency. And Moses is actually standing there with his arms to the sky, and God says, what are you turning to me for? You know, the helicopter's on the roof, basically, get in. And the Midrash here, just as a little example of how Midrash works, says that there was somebody named Nachshon who went in first. It wasn't even Moses. It was some random, you know, schmo who just started charging into the water, and the water came up to his ankles and knees and yada, yada, all the way to his nostrils. And it's at that moment when the sea split. And if you're wondering, you know, did the Exodus happen and what is this based on? And is there agricultural or archaeological evidence? There's a great article, Rabbi David Wolpe preached on it. He's a rabbi in Los Angeles, incredible orator, one of the finest. And he actually from the bima, from the podium, you know, said, it's not clear if the Exodus happened. You know, why does it matter? And then, of course, all the archaeologists in his congregation of thousands, you know, brought him a lot of information. And the kind of punchline is there is some archaeological evidence, and, you know, there's a lot of imagination. Any questions, thoughts?
I think the tightness between myth and reason is very interesting here. You know, you just spoke to that about this being real or not real. And I think the best stories are ones that are completely unclear. You know, they have a way of grabbing us. I think it's great. You know?
Yeah. And we lean into that. I mean, the kind of meaning making that is around the narrative is very potent. And yet it's cool to see some of the archaeological hints to it as well. I think it's very, I mean, if you're ever in Israel and go to the Israel Museum, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to see like these idols, you know, that were in the temples, and fertility goddesses, and you know, the lulav is the rain stick, and these ways in which people are people, you know, craving human and tangible connections to what we can't see.
Rabbi Yitz had a really good conversation about this on Saturday at the Shabbat morning Torah study. He said that he finds it helpful to view the Torah as like a collective dream, that our dreams have elements of real life, but then there's meanings woven into them. And, you know, when I was in college and I took my history class, we were studying ancient history, and we talked about how could you communicate something to somebody throughout time that you would listen to? I mean, we have the whole Indiana Jones that we can see on a tomb, that if you open this up, there's a curse, but we wouldn't listen because we have no respect for the intelligence or the reality of people in the past. but that, using this dream terminology, it becomes something transferable through time. I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, very powerful. Yeah, myth making and how do we make the myths, and how do the myths make us? And how are they still making us? I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things to me about for Judaism being as ancient as it is. We are still writing in the margins of our sacred texts, and it continues to create us and we to create it. So I want to come to this line, which is also on the front cover of your course chapter. Bechol dor hayav la'adam lerot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yitziat mi Mitzrayim. And I did it in the Hebrew because I want you to hear the kind of urgency of it, that this really is the whole punchline of, for Jews, the experience of Seder and the story of the Exodus, that in each generation, it is us who left. What do you all make of what does that do, even as you're hearing it? Why is that the point?
Weren't there a lot of people that chose not to leave, that only some people answered the call to leave?
Everybody left. We all left. Nobody stayed. You mean Jews, Change?
Yeah, I could swear that, or maybe I had a dream. I really thought that there was a whole teaching around Passover that a large number of Jews, I bumped my thing, a large number of Jews didn't leave Egypt.
Mm-mm. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there's historically an Egyptian Jewish community for sure, but in terms of the coming out from Egypt, as far as post-slavery, the narrative is that everybody went, because there's the stragglers and the old and the babies. And that's the story later that we hear about Amalek, who attacked us from the back and took the elders. So we know that everybody at least tried to come.
Jade, you might be thinking about part of the Jewish history in Israel and the Middle East, when that other king came and was like, you can stay, but you have to pay taxes, and some of the people left and some of them stayed.
I might have mixed up stories. I'll have to go look back and look.
Yeah, and maybe you're thinking of Babylonia. Some Jews did stay in Babylonia.
I might have mixed up stories.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a fair thing to mix up because both were really rough neighborhoods. Okay. So did anybody have any imprint or idea about why this would be the key sentence, or what that means, that in each generation that we are obligated to see ourselves as if we personally left?
I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, a lot of my kind of how I map things, again, my bias is this Buddhist speak. So I don't have a lot of background in the rabbinic commentary, or I haven't heard what people think about this, but just how I interpret that and how it makes a lot of sense to me is it's about spiritual awakening. It's about saying, like, it's this issue of slaves and this word work. And like, what is that? Like, how do you work in this world in a way that you're not enslaved? How do you do that? And there's a way to do that. Okay. And there's lots, I'm sure I could spout off lots of stuff in Buddhism about this and how Zen teaches this. I don't know exactly how it's taught in Judaism. I have fragments, I know, but that's how I see it as a deep question about in your own life. How are you aware of your own situation, and what are you going to do to kind of this issue of intention? Where is your intention, and how do you know that from the background? Are you just causally streaming through life with no sort of intention at all? You're just going to carry on with the causes and conditions of your parents forever? Is that what you're going to do? Or are we going to somehow become aware of our disposition and do something different? And that's how I see this line is like really important to me, I think.
I guess I would add that the power of memory in intention, but also in taking responsibility. So what of this resonates today? What of this is reflecting contemporary times, but also historical moments that have repeated and repeated and repeated. And, we've potentially been on different sides of those repetitions, but to have that remembrance of the experience of slavery and the experience of that depth of oppression is, I think, critical to who we are and what kind of responsibility we take in the contemporary moment.
I love both of what you both shared, the awakening and the awakening. Both of you spoke in different ways. The personal awareness and then the responsibility out of that awareness. David, what are you thinking?
I think for me, the word liberation is really stands out in the idea. I have a friend who is, they're a yogi, and the idea of liberation for them is spiritual liberation is central to who they are and how they live their life. And thinking about the work of liberation that we all do. And JJ, I think you were talking about like our life and identities in capitalism, our liberation from capitalism and our liberation of in our spiritual lives and our liberation, this central thread of liberation through our existence across multiple capacities in life and existence is just so it's just so central to this liberation of we are the ones who left. Both opens the door, but also opens the door for us to be here now, but also opens the door for us to continue the work of liberation, I suppose.
Well, I'm recording this. I'm going to go back and write all of your,
One last thing, not a last thing, it's something I can't help but not say, is just how close, how profoundly anti-Semitic the world is. It's ridiculous. I wasn't really quite aware to the extent that some of the things going on in this country until I took classes at a university about Jewish identity. I learned a lot about sort of the bigger cultural project it's just craziness, the stuff that's going on. So if you think you can't be enslaved again, yes, again, we are a lifetime, 20 years away from complete chaos if people aren't aware of certain things.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying it from a kind of a political standpoint. It's crazy, really crazy out there.
Yeah. And, what we can't see, the hate that is still so fueled. And I think I spoke about it one time or two times ago, but the twinning between Pesach and Easter and the spikes in anti-Semitism around that time. And Constantine's Sword, watch that movie, read that book. So critical. And David, what you shared, this is the source, of course, of liberation theology. The idea of God playing a role in our awakening, in our coming out. And it's the first successful slave rebellion in Haiti. They were reading this. People are still reading this in jails. Mandela was a huge awareness around the Exodus narrative. Yeah. And still today, right, this last little part of today, every generation, like right now, we have to connect in some way to that visceral lived experience. And here again, we see the kind of like genius of the rabbinic tradition, in that it makes these biblical texts lived visceral experiences. Here we are eating the history, eating the dirt, eating the clay.
As someone with a degree in psychology, I love how Torah is infused with this brilliance, and the rabbinical tradition with this brilliance of how people work and how people work in community, and intentionally setting up the boundaries to keep everybody connected. It's not a coincidence that Freud is the one that brought psychology to everybody. It's beyond what. And my background is that I spent 20 years on the Red Road in the Ojibwa and Lakota, and I'm a sun dancer. And anyway, one of the stories in that group is that the medicine wheel with the 4 colors is the 4 nations of humans, and that each nation had a different path that God gave when we all got separated, and that we all have a piece to learn to bring back to humanity when we got back together, which is today's age. And I could see Judaism being the understanding of humans themselves, because that's missing everywhere else. I think it's beautiful.
Wow. Oh, Jade, you just bring it. I love it. And what Jade was sharing is important to note, that we are liberated as a community throughout time, both past, present, and future. This is not a Siddhartha. We are not a Siddhartha people. We are hopelessly communal. Everybody gets out together. So let's look a little bit at the practicum of how this plays out. Pesach is one of the most legalistically precise of any holiday. There are endless laws and rules about the proximity to which this mitzvah can be most scrupulously, how do you say that word? Scrupulous?
Scrupulously.
Yeah, observed. And one of the big kind of red lines is this idea of chametz. And this is ego, Evan, at some level. This is anything that is fluffed, anything that is inflated, anything that is leavened, right? So this, like, Pesach becomes the ultimate ancient fast. It's like a juice cleanse on a very deep level. So anything that can rise, we cut out. And then foods prohibited to own, eat, or benefit. Yeah, we don't do any like wheeling and dealing. Only eat the flat stuff.
Well, we kind of do, because we get to sell our chametz we put our chametz in a specific place and tell the rabbi where that is, and then it gets sold for Passover. And then there's taking the candle to hunt for things. It becomes just like a really fun game, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of game to it for sure. And Kitniot is one of those kind of games that kind of shows our globalness, that folks who are why does it say NA to Sephardi? Because many Sephardi
Not applicable.
Yeah, but that's actually the opposite,
Oh.
because many Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews eat these things.
Right. So it says these are prohibited by some on Passover, and then it says, but not Sephardic or.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Alan.
But as long as I blabbed
Yeah.
into the thing, how do you make oats rise? I never knew you could do that. So I've always been confused about why they get included in that.
Because I'm gluten-free, but I just finished making a sourdough that has no gluten and no chametz, but I used just the yeast in the air does it. And if you add something like, so I add eggs, and I add eggs, chia and flax, and those things together replace the gluten. And then I used like wild grapes that grow near my home as the liquid. And so I've got a sourdough going. So they actually you can become very good at gluten-free and have it be just like regular bread.
Anything can rise, Alan.
Oh.
And the thing is, it's also, there's a time limit related to it. Like if anything can get puffed up or absorb water, it can be considered chametz. And matzah is even, flour and water. There's nothing special about matzah. The trick is that it hasn't been cooked more than 18 minutes. And there's all these other constrictions around where did you get the flour and the facility that it's in, and on and on and on.
Yeah, I guess my question came from, if I throw oats in a pot and boil them for 6 minutes and eat them, there was no rising and there was no 18 minutes. But
they
we
get
don't have
puffed.
to belabor this.
They get puffed up.
I'm just absorbing the water.
And I read something about this last year, that in Europe, where the Ashkenazi, where they made their bread out of other things besides wheat, like I am. So their bread did rise, even though it was made out of those, because they ground them into flours like I do.
Yeah. All right. Well, I won't belabor. Thank you.
No, it's a great question, Ellen. And again, matzah is flour and water. And we say hamotzi over it. So I guess that you would come back ultimately to both the keva and the kavanah of it. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to get ready. And people go nuts. There's like, if you're ever in Jerusalem, you'll walk into houses and everything will be covered in tin foil. It's a very intense spiritual process and a physical process. People replace their dishes, they replace their pots, they cover all their countertops. I mean, the layers of preparation happening, both internal and external, are to the nth degree. I'm sorry?
Counting Omar, right? It starts way before.
Yeah, counting of the Omar begins the second night of Pesach. I'm going to put in the chat also. So this is an article that I wrote. Just get the link. A few years ago, but people still dig it, so I'll put it there, about kind of preparations for Pesach. So yeah, it happens on many levels, this idea of preparing to leave, preparing to leave Egypt, and whatever our Egypt might be. I think we're going to come to that slide in a moment. The source of the word Haggadah comes from this verse right here. Vehigadata, Haggadah, you shall be a storyteller to your children. You shall recount the tale. And this is a huge part of, what it means to be a Jew, is to be a storyteller. And the word Seder, of course, means order. My gosh, doesn't that brisket look so good? That is insane. I want that brisket so bad.
I love it.
Oh my God, that looks incredible.
It's like my favorite thing, brisket. I can.
I know.
I'm kidding.
That one, oh my God. I have dreams about that. Yeah, and then, you have, just check this out, right? Like, this is actually a really beautiful Seder plate, like super crazy old, so simple. These symbols of like another dimension. It's like a little time capsule. Right? When you look at here's the horseradish, tears, bitterness, the cement, the mortar, signs of spring, life, death. It's just, it's an altar. And there's a lot of mysticism in the arrangement, and so beautiful. So Seder means order. Greco-Roman symposium meets rabbinic ritual. You have 2 Seders. I'm going to be leading the TBI one this year. So if you want to come, you're all invited.
Oh.
Yeah. Second night Seder, I'll lead. Haggadah to tell.
Assuming we get to be in person, right?
Whatever, however, it'll happen. 300 versions of Haggadot. There's the Sarajevo Haggadah, which is ridiculous. That's one that I love. And there's another one by he's not a rabbi, artist named David Moss. His Haggadah, if you ever want to check him out, he's a contemporary artist. And so it's this intricate dance. These are the dance moves. Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachsa Motzi Matzah Maror Korech Shulchan Orech Tafun Barech Halel Nirtzach. And we go through them all, and we drink a lot. There's 4 cups of wine. And kind of 4 worlds, you could say, mystically. And you go deeper and deeper into the experience of, then and now. And you eat all the way here. So there's a lot to do before you eat. So pack your own snacks. No, just kidding. I'm trucking along, everybody. Let me just see how many more slides. So wow, wait, Bezmer. Okay, let's see what we can do. Okay. Oh, right. This video was about the orange on the Seder plate, about kind of marginality and who who is in today's margins. Here's the choreography of what goes where and why. Some people use a beet instead of the shank bone, the veggies. Salt water is key. Tears. And the charosets is, there's part of one of the midrashim that I mentioned about the women seducing their husbands relates to the charosets, the apple trees that the women gave birth under the apple trees. So it's a beautiful kind of moment of life affirmation. Yeah, this quote, Israel Zangwill, pretty cool. So here's the 4 cups. And it's based on these 4 verbs, each cup. I will bring you out. I will rescue you. I will redeem you. And I will take you as my own. So beautiful. And you see Lizzie and everybody, you can see this is the verse that it comes from, those 4 verbs. Is everybody okay? I see everybody's kind of yawning. Yeah, I know it's sleepy. This weather, I just want to curl up. So Karpas, we start out with spring. We start out with tenacity and with hope. B'rei Priha Adama. These are wonderful blessings if you ever want to, for your tomato or your carrots or whatever. You can try any of these. Then we tell the story. And we say this Aramaic, halach ma'anya, liyachalu. It's very like choo-choo train, like it's happening. You can like feel the momentum of the narrative. And we include the land of Israel. So there's this forward projection trajectory all the way to the land of Israel of ultimate redemption. Graves, I don't know if we've mentioned this, but what makes a Jewish cemetery, one element is that all the toes are pointing the same direction towards Jerusalem, so that when the Messiah comes, we just pop up and walk all in the same direction from around the world. Telling the story, we are looking for distinctions. So these 4 cups, there's 4 questions, and we're looking for the kind of liminality, the gray. And of course, the questions stir other questions, right? And that's the whole purpose, to get everybody to ask more questions. And Seder's, a good Seder can go all night, 3 a.m, whatever. Avadim Hayinu. So there's that Avadim, those slaves, those workers. We were slaves, we were workers in Pharaoh's Egypt. Yep. I can't remember which YouTube this was. Does anybody remember? Oh, I think this was kind of the Maccabees song. It's a bit cheesy, I thought, but something for everybody. And this is a slice of that verse again. In every generation, we are obligated. And it's to see ourselves. That's another kind of moment of like, what does that mean to see ourselves? It's not to remember. It's not to, it's to see ourselves physically. And then the generational piece, the obsession with continuity. And we understand why, right? Because the Exodus was itself, our Exodus was made possible because of a baby. Coming back, Ellen or Lizzie, to your noticing of baby Moses. So it becomes multi-generational. And not just that we say it to our kids, but because of God, the connection to God. So it's not just a historical, it's also a spiritual return. And returning, it's never done. This powerful quote by Professor Walzer: wherever you are, it's probably Egypt. There is a better place, and we get there together. Let's see, 8:23. Are we getting close? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so these are the three main symbols. And the kind of core elements, like they say, if you don't talk about these three things, you haven't done it. So there's all sorts of ways to do Passover Seder. Some people do it in 5 minutes. Some people do it in 5 hours. But you have to mention the zroah, the shank bone, the matzah, and the maror. This was that cheesy song by some old boyfriend of Taylor Swift. I don't know if you all saw it, but our assistant for Talmud Torah had to clue me in of all the why this guy mattered. I was like, what? Anyway, Taylor Swift used to like him, apparently. We get to the end. So then at the end, we kind of surrender even deeper to the idea of prophecy, that Elijah and Miriam will arrive, and we open the door. And it's not clear, if they're coming in or we're coming in or we're going out or where we meet, but it's for sure a call to action. And Elijah kind of Santa Claus in and does a little wine drinking, and, everybody watches the cup. Uncle Harry really does it or something.
Don't we also have a time at the beginning where we open the door and invite anybody in to eat?
Nice. Yep. Both ends.
Put that on the list.
Yeah, it's not one of the steps, but it's a tradition. We welcome in the stranger.
I just want to say that I feel a little bit sad that we can't meet in person, because I think in real life, in person, getting to meet, we would be able to talk afterwards, because everybody says something so interesting. And I wish we had some social.
Yeah, well, hopefully, we're going at this for a long time. You all know there's a second part to it so, God willing, we'll be able to, although it's kind of late, it's kind of nice to be cozy, I find. Who knows? We'll see what. Any takeaway thoughts, agitations?
Passover is a lot more profound than than the versions that I've experienced. It can be, I will say that. I think there's it's something that I do every year, but I'm just kind of realizing, I think it could be a lot deeper.
Yeah.
You would make a really great one that was also Zen, because if you go to, is it Haggadot.com? I wrote one that was Native American that goes to all the four cups were the 4 directions, and I integrated the questions with the native teachings. You could totally do one that ties in with where you've been as a Zen priest. That would be beautiful. And then once you put it out there, anybody else that is on that path can follow your Haggadot.
Yeah, there's a Haggadah with a yin yang on the front. I'm trying to remember. I'll find the name of it. It exists, all to say. It all exists. Okay, everybody. Well, I wish you a beautiful Thanksgiving. You know, maybe think about this connection between Passover and Thanksgiving, and the land and the people and return and liberation. And we'll see you all on the 1st.
Thank you.
Okay.
And in Hanukkah.
Wonderful class, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Lila Tov.
Canada Tov.
Lila Tov.
Tov.